Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Path to DevOps series, and maybe to the most expected episode of this series until now, because so far we've completed all of the tasks on our board and we're ready to tie the loose ends together and get these 3 microservices deployed to Kubernetes and publicly exposed so that we can see our website running finally. So if you're excited for this, let's jump right in. All right, so we have our AKS cluster. It's created. We have our pipelines. Now we just need to tie the ends together and teach the pipelines to deploy to this AKS cluster. And the way we'll do this, because of the design in the pipeline, is to create a variable group called k8s-deploy. You will find this referenced here as a variable group in every of the pipelines. Yeah. So you need to create this variable group, and inside of it you'll need to add variables such as cluster.name, cluster.rg, deployment namespace. This needs to be the name of your AKS cluster. This needs to be the name of the AKS resource group. The namespace can be any string you think of. And then you also need to add the variables for Spring config, so that the backend microservices can talk to the database and authenticate against it. Okay, so you need to give the URL, the username, and the password, and you can make these secret by hitting this padlock over here, and they will become stars and you won't be able to read them. Okay, so this is for security reasons. This information, you should be able to scrape it off your environment variables. So if you followed along until now, you should go to environment variables and you will find them here. You can copy them from right there. As for this info, it needs to match your Kubernetes cluster. The namespace can be whatever you want it to be. And again, you need to make sure that you have one -deploy variable group for each of the microservices. So cart API -deploy, frontend -deploy, and product API -deploy. I need to tell you that I've made a change to the deployment manifest, the Kubernetes deployment manifest YAML. So I've added one more variable in each of these. So it's the same as before. It's app name, it's container port, replicas, and service type. But I also had to add service port, because the front end was expecting to read from the backend on port 8080, and that's why I added this new variable and I modified the Kubernetes manifest YAML slightly. I can show you what I mean. So if you look at the Kubernetes manifest, you will see that port is no longer a hard-coded value of 80. It's actually this token. So for the backend services, cart API and product API, you need to make this 8080 so that the front end can talk to them. And for front end, you can leave it as 80. It's fine. All right. So once you have these variable groups configured, it's time to run the pipelines. Now, I've already run the pipelines before to test that everything is running, but I will delete them. All right. So I'll delete all 3 deployments. There we go. And it's time for me to trigger everything one more time, all the deploy pipelines. Yeah, and I would advise you to start with the backends, because once the front end starts, it needs to connect to the backends. So it makes sense that you deploy the backends first and ultimately you deploy the front end. So I'll see you guys in a few minutes when everything is deployed. A few moments later. All right, all 3 pipelines are now finished. As you can see here, I'm not cheating. And let's see the status once we go and use kubectl. So as you can see here, the cart API and product API have finished for a couple of minutes and the front end has just finished. Let's see the status of the pods. And if everything I'm doing here sounds like a foreign language, please check out the Kubernetes series, which is also ongoing on this channel. It will teach you a lot of what I'm doing here. So as you can see, everything is running. Let's look at the services as well. The backends, I created them of type cluster IP because they don't need to be publicly facing. They don't need to have access to the internet. And then there's also the front end, which is of type load balancer. That means it received a public IP address. This public IP address is listening on port 80 HTTP. So let's check this out in the browser. And it should take a couple of moments. There we go. Yeah. The web page is now loaded. So let's hit buy now. There we go. We got a message back. Okay, so the front end is now integrated with both the product API because we're seeing the photos, and also with the card API because when you hit this button, it's actually sending a request to the cart API and the request pops up here. Yeah. So yeah, I'll let you guys see the logo as well. It's amazing. I spent a lot of time doing this. Yeah. But this is another milestone that we finished. Okay. Let me break down what we've done so far so that you understand where we are at in this DevOps journey. The initial milestone we had was to understand the set of microservices we're going to work with. So the first part of this path to DevOps journey consisted of running the set of applications locally and compiling them, understanding how these microservices interact with one another and how the page looks on your computer. Yeah. Now this is the second step, and again we haven't achieved DevOps, actual DevOps, like the good stuff. Yeah, we're just trying to get more automated. We now have pipelines. We were introduced to the concept of pipelines in Azure DevOps, Azure pipelines. So now we're able to trigger this deployment process and the build process many times. We also have some cloud infrastructure, which obviously we've created manually. We have a Kubernetes cluster. We have the MySQL server where we have the schema for these two backend microservices. So all in all, we kind of have this ecosystem that we've created using various components like pipelines in Azure pipelines. Then there's some cloud infrastructure, but not everything is tied up together. It doesn't make a lot of sense. If someone would ask me tomorrow to expand this and create a new environment and put that in the pipeline, what would I do? I don't know how long it would take. This is not very, let's say, pluggable. The design of the pipeline was more meant to be easy to use for you guys. So once you download the code from my GitHub account and you add it to your Azure DevOps organization, it's easy for you to spin up a pipeline that's already functional out of the box, so you can understand how a pipeline feels like. Yeah, but in the future we have even more milestones and even more plans. So what we're going to do in the next video is to discuss the problems that we're currently facing. Even though this page is publicly available and can be consumed over the internet, it's not something final, and I'm not talking about the layout of the web page. That's totally fine. It's the way people are accessing the web page, in terms of how our pipelines look like, in terms of processes. We still have a long way to go in terms of improvement, but this is a fair start and it's something that we can be proud of. So if you followed along and you reached this checkpoint, first of all, thank yourselves because you had the patience to go through all of this, and also give yourself a pat on the shoulder because right now you know a lot more than when you started this journey. And obviously, if you enjoyed the content, pat the like button as well and give me a comment letting me know that you actually enjoy this type of exercise. This is pretty much it. I'll see you guys in the next episodes where we will continue to improve this journey and this whole ecosystem that we've started to create. Thank you very much for giving me your time of the day, and I wish you a good one. Cheers.